Hiring the right salespeople for the company you work for is not always easy, and being the right salesperson for the organization you're trying to go into, that may not always be as easier said than done. But what is it that most top companies, what is it they're looking for? In this episode, we're going to outline and give you exactly that. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. On this episode, we have amazing Peter Smith coming on the show. And Peter wrote a book called, Hiring Squirrels. Now, we're not talking about hiring animals. Well, the concept, Peter will explain it. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, we encourage you to please subscribe, or you can go ahead and tell somebody else about the show. We'd love to hear from you and connect with us as well on LinkedIn. We do have LinkedIn training programs, and we do have a sales mastermind. We'd love to have you check out as well. Find more information in the show notes below. Now, as we dive into the episode, Peter gives an overview of what this concept of hiring squirrels, no chasing squirrels, what hiring squirrels is all about. And it's going to help us to be able to become better sellers and also become better leaders. Let's dive in. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Donald. Great to be here. Delighted to be with you.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation, especially when it comes towards finding talent and making sure to identify if we're in the right place. I think many times as sales professionals, we tend to go where we can get good cash. But we need to make sure we're going for the right gigs. And as the leaders, we need to make sure we're bringing the right people on. So before we dive into all that fun stuff, though, tell us a little bit more about you and your background, Peter.
Yeah, so I've been in sales and sales leadership, hired and built, developed many teams over the years. My space happens to be the jewelry space, the sort of luxury jewelry space. So what I've been doing over the last, I've worked for some, pretty well-known companies in our space, both at the retail level and also at the sort of branded level, the supplier level. So what I do now is really a combination of the two of those. I'm a consultant for brands and suppliers into that jewelry space, right, to help them do what they need to do. And then I have this really fun element of my business, which is teaching sales master classes and manager meetings and keynotes and so on and so forth around that kind of stuff. And most of that I sort of build around my three books: Hiring Squirrels, which is the first one, which is really about hiring salespeople; Sell Something, which was the second one, really about the psychology of storytelling; and then the Sales Minute, the more recent one. And then I'm a columnist for a couple of industry magazines as well. So the masterclass I sort of teach around that, but the foundation of what I do is really goes back to that first book, because in effect that's kind of the platform for everything in
Mm.
sales. If we hire, it's the whole Jim Collins thing, right? Get the right people on the bus, and then there's so much stuff we can do. If you don't have the right people on the bus, you're continually chasing your own shadow.
Well, this sounds like it's going to be some good stuff today. The name attracted me to it. Hiring squirrels. For those animal activists out there, I don't want them to get the wrong idea. I think that we are exploiting animals for sales. But tell us about what that is, because that's going to be the premise of our conversation.
So the Hiring Squirrels has been out a few years now, and where the name came from, which was deliberately sort of and positively agitative, was there was a guy called Mac Anderson who wrote a book in the probably 1997, 98, and the book was "You Can't Send a Duck to Eagle School." And in that book, which made so much sense to me, in that book was a series of sort of minor sort of statements and questions. And one that really got my attention was, if I told you that your company mission was to climb a tree, would you train a horse or hire a squirrel? I'm paraphrasing, right? It might have been the other way around. But in
Yeah.
effect, he said, if I told you your mission was to climb a tree, would you train a horse or would you hire a squirrel? And that was a light bulb moment for me, because I felt like for decades, we had continually sort of run into these obstacles where we would hire people who seemingly had all of these great traits and characteristics, but they could never really sell. They could never really drive business. And so, in effect, I thought the notion of hiring a squirrel, in other words, they already have the ability to climb a tree, and now teach them the stuff that's teachable, made an awful lot more sense. So I worked with an organization out of Princeton over a 5-year period, and we looked at 700 salespeople who are already employed in luxury goods sales at that point. And what we found is 58% of those people ought not to have been in any job that had anything to do with sales. So there were
58?
58%. And honestly, it's not a lot different. I suspect that sample size was 700 people. I suspect if the sample size was 7,000 people, we'd be still looking at something, because the numbers I see in all of the academic papers on this are really 50 to 55% of people who are in sales ought not to be in sales. In other words, they don't have the basic traits to be successful in a sales role.
So that goes back into my thinking. Why?
Yeah.
Why are they even in sales, like in the first place?
Well, I think like a lot of people, tons of people fall into sales, right? For whatever reason. It wasn't, there might be 8 and 9-year-old kids walking around saying, when I grow up, I want to be in sales. But I've never met them. I certainly didn't meet them when I was 8 or 9. We wanted to play for Liverpool, or we wanted to be in a Bruce Lee movie. We weren't thinking too much about, I want to be in sales. So I think a lot of them fall into that, and they have this mistaken idea that it's not really a profession. Yeah, anybody can do it, right? Because if I can go get a job someplace in a Chanel store or Gucci's, whatever it might be, then how difficult can it be? And of course, what you and I talk about are that upper echelon of sales professionals, those people who really can drive business. And so, to sort of answer your question in terms of, what does, in some respects, define, these people, I felt it boiled down to three things. And really, in some respects, this is the premise of the book, Hiring Squirrels. And not in any order of priority, but A, B, and C, or one, two, and three. First of all is drive, right? You could literally spend a weekend, with you and with Tony Robbins and with anybody else. And when you come back next week, you'll remember having had a good weekend. But if you didn't have the inherent drive, the self motivation to be good in sales, you're not going to be any different for having spent the weekend with some gurus debating, what the best approach are. So again, if you've got to call somebody in the morning and say, "Hey, get up out of bed, get after this," they're simply not going to be very good in sales. And so drive was the first of the three. So you simply have to be motivated. The whole sort of Lou Holtz quote, what do you do with people who are not motivated? I cut them, is what he said, right? And in some respects, it's hire those people who already have drive. And you can see evidence of that in their academic background, in their interests, in their hobbies, and certainly in their professional career. The second one is empathy. If you don't care about what people think, you're not going to be very, very good in sales. And so what you find is the very, very best salespeople, and it is, in some respects, it's kind of the word of the day, empathy, but it is so, so very true. If I don't really care what motivates you, and I'm not able to use, the whole sort of Moravian communication model, if I'm not watching what that 55% is communicating beyond just simply your words, I'm not going to be very, very good in sales. And you can't teach drive, you can't teach empathy. The third of them, and I think in some respects, this is the toughest one to spot, and that is resilience, right? If you think about being successful in sales, you have to be not welcoming of rejection, but you have to understand that it is an inherent part of any successful sales world, that you're going to get a lot of rejection. And if you struggle with that, you're just simply asking the tough question, right? You stop asking for the sales. Now, I
Hmm.
don't know, it might have been Zig Ziglar who said it, but in general, about 50% ask for the sale, and about 70% of people say yes when they're asked. So you got that huge gap. And I just stop asking, because the easiest way for you not to do psychological damage to me. And again, if you go back to the sort of even the psychology on this, Sanja Lyabomirsky at Riverside at University of California had written that rejection to people who have low resilience is similar in the brain to being physically accosted. So if you have sufficiently low
Mm.
reserves of resilience, you're going to struggle to be very, very successful in sales. So in effect, the book was built around hire the things that are not trainable: drive, empathy, resilience, and then you can teach the rest, right? You can teach culture, and you can teach product information, and you can teach approach and all of that kind of stuff, but you can't teach those three. I can make you aware of it. Hey, Donald, I think you need to be a little bit
Yeah.
more understanding, and do a little bit more listening, and let's keep an eye on some of the body language that you're communicating when you're with that customer. But I'm not going to teach you to be more empathic than you already are. If you don't have it, you're going to struggle to be successful.
Yeah. So fascinating. And I'll go back to this. Like, so sometimes though, as leaders and hiring managers, you meet with people and you try to identify some of those things. Like,
Yeah,
what are their drive? You're never going to be 100% accurate because, I mean, 58% of people, for goodness sake, are in
right. Yeah,
snuck pass, so to speak. What is it then in those things? So if I'm looking for drive, you mentioned academics or past performance, or in the last one I thought was fascinating too, the resilience factor. How can you do that? Because people could say something really cool on Friday, but then Monday comes when it comes to putting your feet in the water, and
yeah.
they are not performing accordingly. How can we help to
Right.
identify
So
that
there's
further?
it's a great question, and in effect, that's really what the book was built around, are the questions that can help you uncover the inherent traits. And so, for instance, if I break them down
Yeah.
into each of the three component parts, if I'm looking to understand somebody's drive, I might say to them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how competitive are you? Now, when I'm out there talking, with
Mm.
sales leaders, you'll get people who will sometimes say, "What is it I'm looking to hear? Is it 10? Is it what?" And I said, "What you're looking to hear is their truth, right? Their truth." And it's amazing how people will answer that
Mm.
quite honestly. In other words, they might say 1 to 10 competitiveness. I'd give myself a 6, because what you're really setting up is not
Yeah.
the desire to hear 6. What you're really setting up is, great. Tell me why you would rate yourself a 6. In other words, why are you not a 10? Why are you better than 5? And so what they'll give you, as they sort of express that, is really what their inherent driver is. Well, I don't think about myself as being overly competitive, or when we used to
Mm.
play sports growing up, I was I wasn't getting picked first, and I was just happy to be playing. It's incredible when you phrase questions a certain way, where people will actually tell you that stuff. Another one would be, what do you enjoy most about sales? Now, oftentimes when I've heard people answer that question, they talk about, well, I like people, which is important. Or they'll talk about, I love
Mm.
product, depending on the category that they're in. But what you tend to hear with real sales drivers is they love the hunt. They love to be competitive. They love the
Yeah.
scorecard, right, of sales. And people who are not in this business often think, well, they're hard and possible to work with, and they're aggressive, and they're disrespectful to their colleagues. There's no truth to that necessarily being the case at all, but it's people who look, I'm in
Yeah.
it because I love the fact that, like sports or like some other hobbies that I might have had, I can measure myself. It's like when I paint a room. When I painted this office blue, it looked different at the end of the day than when I started. You're able to see it. And I think for people in sales, it's that way. They get that smell and they want to accomplish something. Does the money matter? Of
Hmm.
course it matters. Do the sales goals matter? Of course they matter. But it's that inherent drive that they want. In terms of the resilience, again, I shape a number of questions around that. And one of the big ones is, what aspect of sales is most challenging for you, right? Now, you'd be amazed at how many people will tell you stuff that seems so profoundly obvious and against their own best interest, such as, geez, I just hate the part where you ask people for money, right? I mean, think about the business we're in. I like connecting with people. I love that we can find some common ground. I love the product, love all of that. But boy, when it comes time to asking for money, you would think there is no way somebody who's interviewing for a sales job would say to you, I don't like asking for money. And yet that in fact is something you might you might hear. You know, another one I might ask, and I'm watching closely their body language when I ask it, is tell me about a recent failure of yours in your professional career. Talk to me about a recent
Mm,
failure. And again, it's incredible when you ask people those kinds of questions that you'll see the physiology change as they start to talk about, you know, that and first of all we see, is there any self-awareness there, is there an honesty about themselves? Because if they say, well, I can't really think of one right now, then move on, right? Move on from that. But they will actually show you in their physiology how they handle rejection. And if it's somebody that seems to, quote, you know,
mhm.
crumble before your eyes, somebody who seems truly distraught about this recent, you know, failure that they had, you got to ask yourself, in a profession like sales where you're dealing with rejection on a day in and day out basis, can you be successful if every time you hear no or some version of no, you collapse?
Well, I think this is a put a little note down to that. That rejection part is, I think that has been one of the biggest stumbling blocks for a lot of the folks that I've connected with. Like, because you hear people who they hear about the opportunities in sales, they hear about the money, they hear about that type of stuff, or go back to the top of the conversation where they just need to get a job and they're like, okay, well, anybody could do sales, so I might as well just do it. But that component, that rejection part, comes out the gate, and they take it too personal, and that makes it so much tough for them because they feel like they make it feel as if they're getting rejected. If I say no, they're thinking I'm rejecting
That's right.
Peter, but in actuality, I'm rejecting a salesperson that's trying to sell me something that I don't know if I necessarily need yet. So
Yeah.
it becomes
Yeah.
very commonplace. And then also a couple of the things that you shared is the just as we're evaluating these individuals, that drive factor, the chase. Like when you were saying that, for me it was that chase. Like I love the fact when I could find someone who had no clue about my company at all, and to be able to paint a picture because it's relevant to something, a challenge they have, and that person agreeing and making that commitment to partner with us. And then the other piece you shared was like not being willing to ask for the money, but framing those questions, like you said, I think are key, where people will reveal it for themselves. And I think when you give people the proper, when you set the stage, and I could be wrong on this, I've seen those companies where it's kind of like, sell me a pen type of things, and it's like, well, it's so ambiguous and they don't know exactly what they're
Yeah.
looking for. But I think when you can tell somebody like the rigors of the job, and what what the team is like, what the organization is like, what those expectations are, and then just ask them, you can be trained, but we want you to but I need you to answer honestly to me these things when I talk to you. Share what your feelings are on this, because the last thing I want for you is to join us and you feel like you're not a part of this. You can't be, hang with this team, so to speak, or for us to bring you on and then you fail at it. I want to make sure you find something that's going to be best for you. And I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think would it help if I framed it like that going into those questions now?
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, I think the the real challenge to and I, obviously I tried to address it as best I could in hiring squirrels, but I still continue to learn on this stuff on a day in and day out basis. But the best way to do it is get at enough questions
Mm,
that speak to the trait you're looking to uncover, because it is remarkable how easily people will reveal who they are if the questions are good enough, as long as you want, and not these filler questions, we've both heard so many silly questions over the years that are really space fillers, but we're trying to, like the thing you were just talking about, this sort of rejection, right?
Yeah.
Again, I go back to Leon Bomersky's quote about, rejection for people who have low resilience is a little bit like to their brain being physically accosted. When you think about that, that to me was a light bulb moment because I thought, who am I? And I say, any president of a company, any vice president of sales, whatever it might be, who am I to ask somebody to continually put themselves in a position where they're getting almost the equivalent in their brain of physically accosted because they don't have the wiring to handle rejection on a day in and day out basis. And yet there might be sales jobs out there somewhere where there's no rejection involved, but I haven't
Yeah.
heard of them. Right? I mean, if you're going to be a superstar, which is what we want from people, if you're going to be at least in that 42%, right? At least in that number of folks who make it onto the continuum of salespeople, whether they're on this level or that level, but at least they are in fact salespeople. You have to be okay with serious and significant doses of rejection. And when they're not, what we see is they protect themselves. And again,
Mm.
they protect themselves by not putting themselves in positions to be rejected. Oh, that was a great meeting. That guy loved us. That work we did in advance, those PowerPoints, they couldn't have been any better. I know we're going to get this business, but you never actually asked while you were there.
Yeah.
So can we move forward? What will it
Yeah.
take for us to move this to the next stage? Because if I don't ask that question, Donald, nobody can say, we're not at that place. Thank you for
Yeah.
coming. Great presentation, but we're not at that place. So you have to have sufficient reserves of resilience to be put in a position where you're going to continue to get rejected. It's a bit of a paradox,
Yeah.
but in some respects, that's what it can be about.
Oh my goodness, that last little bit there was like all that the if people just listen to that last 2 minutes, I think they would have gotten a full worth from this episode. I would love to take the last couple minutes here, Peter, because I think you gave us a really good understanding. If I am a leader, what can I do with the knowledge that I've learned from this episode? And if I'm a sales rep, what can I take from this to help me as I move forward?
All right, so I'll start with the sales managers or the hiring manager. And I said the first
Sure.
thing to do is you have to hire the non-trainable traits, right? You have to hire those traits that are not trainable. In other words, you want the tree to be climbed, hire a squirrel, don't hire a horse. And and
Mm.
and as a reminder, those are drive, empathy, and resilience, right? Those are absolutely critical if you have if you need to have the basis for success in sales.
Mm.
Um, Focus. This would be more about sort of managing existing players, and this is not sort of new, but I think it's worth pointing out. Focus on the motivated, not the unmotivated. The amount of time managers place trying to fix the broken at
Boom.
the expense of working to do more of what's already working. In other words, work with your top people. I think so. I would say focus on the motivated. This one is a big one for me, and I've seen it so many times in my career, and it derails so many managers. And that if that is if you're going to be in managing people, period, but certainly managing salespeople, you better be prepared to manage baggage. Okay? If you're not willing to manage baggage, you have no business managing salespeople. Now, I'm not talking about toxicity. That should be cut out, and your organization will be better for it. But most of the top salespeople I know are really, really good at driving business and developing relationships, but they're not always great at crossing T's and dotting I's. Don't allow that to dissuade you from the stuff that really matters. So I think you've got to be able to manage the baggage. I'd say the last couple of points for the sales managers, one is coach in digestible bites, right? You've got to be a coach, and you can't do everything in one day. You've got to coach in little bites. And then the last thing for them would be empower people, right? From the time we come into the world, we're lying in those, cribs. We want to reach up and touch the little thing above the crib. People need control. And so if you're in the business of micromanaging people, you've either hired the wrong people or you're in the wrong job. In
Mm.
terms of the sales professionals, and I'll say sales professionals, not salespeople, right? These are people who are really serious about their job. First of all, and it's never been easier, and you're one of the cases in point, right? I've become a fast fan of yours just in recent weeks. I discovered you, and I love what you're doing. But you've got to learn something new every day. If you're not,
Hmm.
whether it's podcasts or reading or blogs, but you have got to be learning something new every day, and it has never been easier to do it than it is today. Next point I'd make is watch great salespeople and do that, right? Don't get caught up in the stuff that annoys you about top salespeople. Don't get caught up in, well, I wouldn't do that to my customers. Watch what they do and do that, right?
Yeah.
Third point for them is prioritize selling activities. It's incredible how much time people spend doing all of the stuff that's got nothing to do with actually moving the game forward. And so prioritizing selling activities, I think, is huge. And the last two things, know that selling and service are not mutually exclusive. This idea that I'm somehow improving the life of my customer or my prospect by focusing entirely on service to the exclusion of sales, that's a cop out. That's nothing more than a cop out.
Yeah.
And then just the last thing, only because it's a pet peeve of mine, don't mistake low price for value. Low price has nothing to do with value. Value is a satisfied customer. Period. That is the sales summit of value, is a satisfied customer. That's my gospel.
Wise words. I love it. I love this. I think we have to go out and look for some squirrels. And if you're a horse, you probably need to look for somewhere else to go. Maybe you need to
Well,
find a.
be a better horse. Be a better horse, but you're probably not going to be a squirrel.
Not going to be a squirrel. I love this. Peter, if folks want to get access to the book or to learn about you or connect with you, how do they go about doing so?
I think the best place is LinkedIn. We're all sort of fans of LinkedIn and enjoy there.
Hmm.
They can email me at the retailsmiths at gmail.com, or the retailsmiths.com, the website, and the books, Hiring Squirrels, Sell Something, The Salesman. They're all available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. So, but I think LinkedIn is a place that has become such a rich space for anybody in business who's looking to learn a little something every single day, and that's probably the best place to reach me.
I love it. So I'm going to make sure we put that in the show notes so folks can get access to that. Wealth of wisdom today gave us a lot of good things to think about and how we can improve. So thank you, Peter, for taking the time to come on the show.
Thanks, Donald. It's been an honor to spend some time with you. Thank you.
Anytime.
All right. Bye bye.
Hey, that was Peter Smith. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and connect with him. Tell him that you heard him here on the Sales Evangelist Podcast. He's on LinkedIn. He's active. And the principles that he shared that apply to selling luxury items is the same things when it comes to selling B2B items. There's a importance and a critical component where we, as the organized sellers, we need to make sure that when we are connecting with the prospect, that we make sure we're bringing that value, and then we're asking them the right questions, because oftentimes the buyers will do what we ask them because they see us as that authority figure. But if you're not doing it or afraid of doing it, man, it's going to be a challenge for you, and we want you to change that. Again, this show is designed to help you to 3 to 5x the sales pipeline and to close twice as many deals. And if there's any way we can help you with that, we got you. As always, we want you to thrive. We want you to succeed. We want you to raise your level of thinking, but go out and do big things. See you on the next one.